We have 32 federal agencies that are armed. You say, well, I want the FBI to be armed and the Sheriff's Office, so do I. How about the Department of Agriculture? Do you think they need SWAT teams? A SWAT team swooped in Los Angeles a week ago to shut down an organic food store for the crime, get this, the high crime of serving milk directly from the cow. This is the Department of Agriculture trying to take care of you. They also shut down John and Judy Dollarite, who live in Missouri. What was their crime? Selling bunnies without a license. $500 fine for not having a license, but a $90,000 fine when you added up all the per bunny fines that they had to pay. But the government said not to worry, you can pay by credit card on our website. Problem with you. What do you think it's going to do to Gibson's guitar business to be shut down and to have it all over the news that FBI agents and Game and Wildlife are in their business? Meanwhile, we have 10% unemployment. Does this show an example of government being friendly to business or government that is now overzealous? The EPA. We've all heard about the EPA with regard to the coal industry in our state and other industries within our state. If you want to say, well, the EPA is just doing what they need to do, tell that to Robbie Wrigley. She's 40 years old and has 3 small children. She lives in Pascagoula, Mississippi. She got 8 to 10 years in jail. She's described as one of the greatest polluters we've ever had in the country. Do you know what she was doing? Was she dumping chemicals in the river or doing something heinous? She was moving dirt on her own property. Her dad and her dad's partner, her dad's 70, her dad's partner is 80, and she's 40. They own 20 acres of land and they were developing it. It was actually low-income housing. They're developing the housing, but there was low areas on the land. They were filling it in with dirt. They were polluting their own property, supposedly, with dirt. Well, how do you do that? They said it's a wetland. The closest stream is 2 miles away. There's no river, there's no pond, there's no wetland. In fact, there's no water on the land at all, but the government said it's a wetland, so they need a special permit. The problem, when we started these programs, when we started Social Security, there were 50 workers and 1 retiree. Now we're down to less than 3 workers and 1 retiree. Within the next decade or so, we're going to have 1 worker to 1 retiree. This is population demographics. It's not anyone's fault. And that's what we need to get beyond politically, that this isn't the Democrats' fault, this isn't the Republicans' fault. In fact, these are some good things. We're living longer. That's a good thing. But we're going to have to change the entitlement programs. We can't keep the same way we've always had them. We're going to try to do it on the next generation. So that's why it's unfair when some of these retirement groups send out letters saying, write a letter to Senator Paul, he's going to cut off your Medicare or Social Security. No one is proposing that. We're proposing reforming these systems in the future for the next generation so they can still continue to exist. I'm on the short term somewhat pessimistic about how things are going. We passed the debt deal. They said they're going to cut $2 trillion in spending. Well, you would think that would be good, but they're not actually going to cut anything. It's going to be cuts in proposed increases. Over the next decade, when we work along the congressional baseline, we're going to add $9 trillion in new debt. If we cut $2 trillion, that means we meet the targets of this new super committee. We're still going to add $7 trillion. To put this in perspective, when you look at the numbers of what the caps on spending that are in the bill, the number gets bigger every year. And I kind of scratched my head and I said, I thought if you were going to cut spending, you'd spend less next year than you spent this year. That's the only way I can understand that you cut spending. You have to spend less. And if you cut 1% from each dollar, 1 penny out of each dollar, you can balance the budget in 8 years. It's as simple as that, but you have to have real cuts. You have to spend less next year than this year. Under all the proposals that have come forward so far, you will spend more next year, and you will add more debt next year, and you will not balance your budget ever. There's never a coming together where the lines cross and you balance your budget on any of the proposals other than the penny plan or a balanced budget amendment. Now, a lot of this sounds pessimistic as to which direction we're going. What I would say the optimistic part of this is that we live in a great country. We have a great system. Capitalism has created more wealth than any other system ever known to man. So I think if we're proud of our system, believe in the American dream, and believe that we are the answer, that we believe in ourselves again, I think we can prosper again in this country, and I hope it happens sooner than
why impeachment proceedings haven't started against our president regarding the Wars Powers Act.
The question is what? Yes. The question is with regard to impeachment of the president concerning the War Powers Act. I disagree definitely with the president on the way we went to war. I think we should go to war constitutionally. I agree with what actually the president said during his campaign. In 2007, the president said that no country should, or no president should unilaterally go to war without congressional authority. That's what the Constitution says. Congress is supposed to declare war. We separated those powers. The president executes the war and decides the day-to-day functions of war, but Congress is supposed to declare it, and that's supposed to be a check and balance so you're not always at war. In Libya, for the first time, we went to war. We didn't have troops on the ground, but we went to war, in any other understanding of the word, without any vote in Congress. In fact, a month or two later, they voted in Congress, and the House of Representatives actually voted against the war in Libya, and yet we're still there. That is a problem. The Senate never voted on it. I think we've abdicated our responsibility. With regard to whether it rises to the level of impeachment, I think there has to be a pretty high standard, and we don't need to be trying to impeach every president that comes along. And so at this point, I'm not sure. I think he's in breach of the law. But see, the entire Senate's in breach of the law also. We're supposed to have a budget every year by April 15th by law, and we haven't had a budget for 2 years. So technically, we should probably have impeached all the Senate leadership as well. But I just don't think we can live that way. Ultimately, when people break the law, some of the answer is you have to go through another election cycle to get rid of them. Anybody else?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for coming. Appreciate that. I just heard recently on a conservative talk show that starting next year, the Obama administration is going to take off 5 coal electric generating plants, and that it would result in brownouts and blackouts. And Governor Beshear, my understanding is that he thinks that's a good idea. No clue why, but he does. And so my question is that correct? And is it something that you and the other Congress representatives agree about?
When the president campaigned, he said that his policies would bankrupt coal, and that's what his policies were intended to do. And so that is his intention. Whether or not all the plants, I've heard the same thing you have. I've heard as much as 17% of coal-fired plants may go down. Some of it's that mercury rule, a lot of it's these regulations. Now, one thing we're trying to do to prevent this from happening is we have something called the RAINS Act. Congressman Davis from Northern Kentucky and myself are sponsoring this. And it would say that any regulation that is written by unelected bureaucrats has to come back and be approved by Congress as a law if it's going to cost the economy more than $100 million. And believe it or not, there's over 200 regulations proposed this year that each have an economic impact of over $100 million. But these things should not be passed by unelected people. I mean, the thing is, you may like me or dislike me, but you've got a chance to get rid of me periodically, you know. The bureaucrat, you have no chance. And so bureaucrats shouldn't be making laws that affect the entire economy without the approval of Congress. And I think this is one of the biggest battles we should have. This will pass in the House. We have to get a few Democrats. We have one Democrat, Manchin from West Virginia, who's supporting the RAINS Act, but we need more. And if we can get maybe a handful, we could probably pass it, because I think we'll get most of the Republican vote.
Can I just follow up? I think that part of the problem is, I was talking to some people, and I think part of the problem is that people generally they're doing their jobs, they're doing work every day and whatnot, and they're not really hearing what the problems are. You know, I'm retired, my husband was a business engineer, and so we have an opportunity to hear this stuff. Well, of course, the news media, they're blink out, they're not even bothering to talk about what it really does. And so, you know, we want to like join the Tea Party or whatever to in some way help us spread the word so that people know. If you tell them, it's like, really? Well, I didn't know that. It's like, so how can they lean on their representatives or congressmen or senators if they don't know? How can we get this message out more? Because obviously the media is not doing that.
Well, I think there are a lot of avenues now. You know, we've got the internet, which gives all kinds of alternative news to the main 3 networks. Cable gives alternatives. So I think we do have more medium. We also, I think that I wouldn't give up on trying to influence people, and I'll give you an example. When they passed Obamacare, there was one section of it that really made everybody in America mad, and that was this 1099 provision. It said that if I have a transaction with you and it's more than $600, I got to fill out tax papers on you. Some people do that all day long and would be into the thousands of tax forms. We've tried to get rid of it originally in the bill. We weren't successful. Then we had it as an amendment, and all the Democrats voted to keep it, and all the Republicans voted to get rid of it. But then people kept writing and calling their congressmen. 3 months later, we had it, and it was still a Republican bill. The Democrats took the Republicans' name off of it, put their name on it, and they passed it overwhelmingly to repeal that provision like 80